بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. For the hastening of the reappearance of our master Imam Zaman, please may we recite one loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To begin my speech, I would like you all to pay very close attention to a beautiful and eye-opening narration from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, whereby the Imam states that the relationship between patience and faith is similar to that of the head and the body, meaning that without the head, the body cannot function, and in much the same way, without patience, one cannot have true faith. Now, in the Holy Quran, Allah has in many ayahs praised those who have patience in this world. For instance, in Surah Al-Imran, Allah states, Wallahu yuhibbus sabirin. Allah loves those who have patience. But what exactly does it mean to have patience? Well, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam provides a very clear answer to this question. The Imam states that patience is of three kinds. The first kind of patience is required when faced with a calamity, a divine test, such as an illness, for example. The second kind of patience is required in obedience and servitude towards Allah, such as when we fast during the month of Ramadan. And the third kind of patience is required in avoiding sins, such as disciplining ourselves to lower our gazes. Now, for the purposes of my speech, I would like to focus on the first kind of patience that Imam Ali speaks about, which is to be patient when faced with a calamity. Many of you can perhaps relate to this, but our lives can often feel like one big roller coaster of emotions. As in, much like a roller coaster, there can be many sudden twists and turns, unexpected ups and downs. On some days we can feel as though we are on top of the world. Picture your wedding day, for example, or the birth of your children. How happy did you feel? How proud were you? But at other times it can feel as though the world is collapsing all around us, as though we are under this incredibly intense pressure that we can no longer tolerate. And whether we like it or not, we will be tested, since this world is nothing but a test. It is a place of trials and tribulations. It is not designed to be easy, but rather it is designed to be challenging, especially for those who claim to be lovers and followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We need to prove this claim through the way in which we perform in these worldly tests. And that is why Allah in Surah Baqarah mentions, be sure we shall test you through something of fear and hunger, some loss of goods, or lives, or the fruits of your labor, but give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. But the truth of the matter is that when things are going well in our lives, when we are showered with blessing after blessing, we tend to be very grateful. We say Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, and we have a good opinion of Allah. But if I am to be honest with myself, if I am to take a few moments to reflect on my own actions, I realize that as soon as I am slightly out of my comfort zone, as soon as I am tested just a little bit, I begin to lose my patience, and I start to question Allah by saying, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Didn't I attend Majalis for Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Didn't I pray? Didn't I fast? Didn't I give to charity? So why is this happening to me? How is this fair? But I ask you, is this the correct way to be thinking about these things? These divine tests from Allah? Let us see what the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam have to say. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam says, Al-Masa'ibu mafati'ul ajr. Afflictions are the keys to reward. In other words, these divine tests and challenges we are faced with in this world are opportunities for us to be rewarded. Not just in this world, but more importantly in the afterlife. Now, as a side note, I just wanted to mention, for the avoidance of any doubts, that when I speak about afflictions, these afflictions which are divine tests, and there are afflictions which are punishments. But there's also a third category that should be mentioned. Sometimes in this world, with our free will, we make decisions. For instance, I may choose to drink a liquid substance which I know is harmful to my body. I know that this is going to cause damage. And if I was to drink this substance and cause damage to myself, then this affliction which I have caused on myself is not necessarily a test from Allah, and it's not necessarily a punishment either. This is simply me using my free will to make a bad decision. So when I talk about afflictions in my speech, I am referring to those which are divine tests from Allah. Now, one example which we can look at to change our perspective on the way we view trials and tribulations in this world is to examine the process in which diamonds are created. As some of you may know, diamonds are one of the hardest naturally occurring substances on Earth. That is why they are used for many industrial applications. For instance, oil refineries use diamonds when they are drilling deep inside the Earth's surface to extract oil. They need a very, very hard material to be able to do that. That's why they coat their drill bits with diamond particles. But have you ever asked yourself the question, how are diamonds created? What are the conditions necessary in order to create a diamond? So let us explore this a little bit further. Diamonds are created from the single element carbon. And when these carbon atoms are subjected to incredibly intense heat and pressure deep below the Earth's surface, they form a bond with 4 other carbon atoms, resulting in a crystal structure which eventually forms into a diamond. And it is precisely these conditions which also mean that diamonds are very beautiful and rare, and in exchange expensive and desirable. That is why we see diamonds being used in luxury jewellery, such as rings, watches, necklaces, and so on. But what is very interesting also is that the graphite you see in the tip of the pencil that you write with is also made from the same element, carbon. But since it's not subjected to the same incredible amount of heat and pressure, it results in a material which is soft, a material which is not particularly attractive, a material which is common and cheap. So in essence, the divine tests and challenges we are faced with in this world are Allah's way of strengthening us, of helping us to fulfill our true potential. It is Allah's divine way of creating diamonds amongst His servants. Now, one thing I wanted to also mention is a narration from Imam Ali alayhi salam, which I will paraphrase. The Imam states, if you see Allah sending you test after test, difficulty after difficulty, then you should thank Allah and send your praises upon Him, since this is a sign that He wants to invest in you. He wants to strengthen and purify you through these tests, so that you can fulfill your true potential, so that you too can become a diamond. But on the other hand, Imam also states that if you see your Lord sending you blessing after blessing, and you are living a life of comfort with no tests, with no issues, no problems, then you should begin to be afraid, since this is a sign that Allah no longer wants anything to do with you. Allah no longer wants to purify you and strengthen you through these tests. Allah no longer wants to give you the opportunity to be rewarded. So once we contemplate on this hadith, we realize that really we should be thanking Allah for these divine tests that we are faced with. And it is this reason that as believers, when we recite Ziyarat Ashura, in perhaps the most important part of this incredible ziyarat, in the sajda no less, what do we say? We say, Allahumma lakal hamdu hamda shakirina lak ala musabihim alhamdulillahi ala azim raziyati. Oh Allah, praise be to you, the praise of those who thank you for their misfortunes. All praise be to Allah for my great misfortune. Now, one of the events which took place after Ashura happens in the city of Aleppo. So as I was saying, one of the events which took place after Ashura happens in the city of Aleppo, whereby the captives from the camp of Imam Hussein alayhi salam are being taken to Sham to be confronted by Yazid Lanatullah alayhi. On this journey, a woman sees the caravan of captives and offers some food to the children. The children don't really respond, as you would expect from children who have been traumatized, who are afraid, who have been incredibly heartbroken. So the lady then goes to Hazrat Zainab Salamullah alayha and offers the food. Lady Zainab inquires, what is this food for? So the woman begins to explain her story. She mentions that when she was a young girl between the ages of 5 and 6 years old, she was afflicted with a disease which resulted in her becoming blind, and she had lost her eyesight. As you can imagine, this is not only incredibly hard and difficult for the young girl, but also for the family of the young girl, the father especially. Almost all of you here have children, so you can just imagine that if, God forbid, something was to happen to your children, how would you feel? So the father decides to take this young girl to meet the Holy Prophet, since he knew that this Prophet is a man who has incredible knowledge. He is a man who has a divine connection with Allah, and is a man who is incredibly kind and generous, meaning that anyone who went up to him or went up to his family, the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, was never left empty-handed, was never left disappointed. So once the Holy Prophet hears about this young girl's situation, he accepts the request, but he says, on this occasion, I would like my young boy Hussein to do the prayer, my grandson Hussein to do the prayer. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was only a little boy, but as soon as he raised his little arms into the sky, Allah immediately answered the prayer, and this young girl regained her eyesight. The father can't control his happiness. He doesn't know what to do. He looks at the Prophet, he says, Ya Rasulullah, what can I do? Is there any way I can repay you? Is there any way I can reward you for this? And one thing to note about the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam is that they never do anything for us expecting something in return. Whenever, if you read the stories, whenever people went up to them with a problem, with a request, the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam helped those people without asking for anything in return. They never asked for money or recognition or anything. They always did it out of the goodness of their heart, for the sake of Allah. But on this occasion, the Holy Prophet did have one request. The Prophet mentioned that one day there will come a time where a caravan of captives will enter your city. And within this caravan there will be young children. These children will be thirsty. These children will be hungry. These children will be orphaned. These children will be beaten. All I would ask from you is to offer these children some food. Just a little bit of water. Just a little bit of comfort. Because no one else will. As soon as Lady Zainab hears this, she begins to cry. She begins to cry. So the woman asks, why do you cry? Lady Zainab then went on to say, do you remember that young boy? That young boy who prayed for your health? Do you remember him? The woman thought about it a little bit, and she realized that even though she was blind, she did remember Imam Hussein, because as soon as she regained her eyesight, the blessed head of Imam Hussein was the first thing that she set her eyes on. So Lady Zainab then says, well, if you remember that young boy, take a look at that long spear. Can you see the head on the end of that long spear? Is there any resemblance between that head and Hussein? As soon as this woman sees the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. She begins to beat her chest, she wails, she cries until she falls unconscious. This woman saw Imam Hussein alayhi salam only once in her life, and yet she had this incredibly strong emotional love and attachment towards him. But I can't even begin to imagine the unbelievable amount of pain and suffering that Hazrat Zainab salamullah alayha had to go through, not just on the day of Ashura, not just in the events which happened afterwards, but throughout her blessed life. Since this woman faced difficulty after difficulty. She mourned the death of the Holy Prophet. She mourned the death of her mother. She mourned the death of her father. She mourned the death of her brothers. And she mourned the death of her own children. We must take inspiration from this incredible role model, who was the embodiment of patience, who is referred to as Ummul Masa'ib, so that inshallah whenever we are faced with challenges in this world, we too can have the patience and ma'rifat to successfully overcome these challenges with our faith strengthened, so that we too can thank Allah in the same way that when Hazrat Zainab salamullah alayha was mockingly questioned by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa, how did you find the way Allah treated your brother and your family? What did Hazrat Zainab salamullah alayha say? With a voice full of pride, with a voice full of courage, with a voice full of submissiveness to Allah, with a voice which shook everyone in attendance to their core, Hazrat Zainab said, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila, I saw nothing but beauty. Inshallah we can follow in the footsteps of these incredible role models so that we too can fulfill our true potential and be amongst those who are servants of our Imam. Allahumma اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. If you could end with a loud salawat.